And on a blistering hot afternoon in South Africa, another cloudless day, the animals of Djuma seeking the only refuge, one of the only refuges they can find from this extreme heat, and from the effects of the drought, the Djuma Pan, where everybody has learned to share and share alike, except for that guy. He hasn't quite learnt that lesson. Welcome. My name is Jamie. I have Brian on camera with me this afternoon. James is out with Rusty with Andrew. We've started off our afternoon. It is incredibly warm, as I said. It's, in theory, 36 degrees centigrade, which is 96 in Fahrenheit. That is in theory. Brian and I strongly disagree. We think that the real feel, and this is true actually, in the sun with the pressure and the humidity, the real feel is put it somewhere around 44 degrees centigrade, which is at least over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, probably close to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So really a boiling hot afternoon. Welcome, we are coming to you live, as I said, from Djuma and Arathusa Game Reserves within the Sabi Sands, our little portion of the greater Kruger area in South Africa, so the northeastern corner of South Africa. Not only are we live, but we are also interactive. So if you have any questions that you'd like to feed through, or comments even that you'd like to make, you can do that on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And we do love to hear from you. Let us know if you are joining us for the first time. Oh, this poor hippo is really starting to feel the effects of the drought. And Tim, in theory, Tim is a new viewer watching on YouTube. He wanted to know, where are we going to drive today? In theory, I think that for James and myself, our rough plan is to move between shade spot to shade spot. We did briefly consider the option of a non-stop safari, given the heat, because that gives us at least a bit of a wind chill factor. But Tim, the joys of a live safari is that you never really know exactly where you're going. As it happens, I think I'm going to pop down to the southeastern corner of Djuma. There was reports of Tingana, a big dominant male leopard, who had a waterbuck killed just 50 meters to the south of that junction. I'm hoping that he might decide to grace us with his presence. But as our regular viewers will know, nothing really goes according to plan. I'm also hoping that some of our water holes might present us with enjoyable elephant sightings. Not much else is moving in the heat of the day, although leopards tend to break that rule on a fairly regular basis. You have to feel a little bit for these animals, struggling to get by with the access to water that they have. That terrapin, though, has found the perfect resting place. He's decided to seat himself on the hippo. This hippo needs, I think, to start considering moving across to Sydney's dam. He's losing condition like this for a couple of reasons. One is he is constantly in the sun. The pan is not deep enough for him to be completely submerged. Two, the other hippos are fighting him during the night. There's a lot of conflict over access to water as our water holes decrease every day. And three, there's not much in the way of grazing material at the moment. The content isn't fantastic. Now, I said earlier that it was share and share alike at the waterhole. I'm very sad because about 20 seconds before we went live, there was a stunning water monitor lizard. He was originally drinking in the fresh patch of water where the pumped water feeds into the pan. He was having a drink and a rest there. And as soon as we arrived, he scuttled off into the pan, did a long swim around, bopped his nose on a floating piece of log, and then, there we go, perfect, thank you, Brian, that piece of log that we weren't sure whether it was a terrapin or not, and then climbed out on the opposite bank, disappearing under a crevice under a log, where I think he's gone to hide out in the shade. Water monitors not quite having the bright colors of the rock monitored legavans. That's the South African name for the monitor lizard, is a legavan. I think it's time for us to move on, although I'm quite reluctant to leave our wonderful patch of shade, but I do think it's time for us to move on. Let's go and look for Tingana. In the meantime, let's find out what James's plans are for this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Sizzle Safari on this, the 13th of February in the year of our Lord 2016. Now, it is apparently about 35 to 36 degrees centigrade, 91 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Good grief, it feels a lot hotter than that. It feels like it's about 7,000 or so, just like that. Perhaps you might feel if swimming in a live volcano. That is why I'm speaking with a great slowness. My mind is boiling within my head and therefore not functioning at the speed it once did. That is a waterbuck, and that is a very clever waterbuck, of course, because it is standing in the shade. My name is James Hendry, in case you're a new viewer, and if you are a new viewer, it's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you for giving us of your time, and may I ask that you give us your questions and your comments too. Here comes the waterbuck now. And on camera today, we've got Andrew Francis in his camouflaged hat, dark glasses, Sennheiser earphones. He's really rigged up. And if you want to talk to us, hashtag Safari Live on the tweet, or questions at wildearth.tv on the email. Now, I'm going to be silent for a little while, and I want you to try and appreciate, try and remove yourself from whatever seat you're sitting on at the moment, wherever you happen to find yourself in the world. Try and remove yourself to an experience here where there is a very dry heat covering your body. You're starting to sweat, but you are sitting in the shade. And now listen carefully and take a deep breath in and try and smell what I'm smelling. I'm going to be quiet for the next 15 seconds. Right, now, what I would like you to do, if you don't mind, those of you who feel like it, send us through in 3 words, or three or less words, just the feeling that you got there. Because there's a complete silence here. There's no noise at all, except for the odd buzzing of a fly, and just as the odd gentle zephyr touches the top of the trees, you can hear a slight rustling of the wind. Otherwise, everything is completely silent. The birds are huddling in the shade. You can see the mammals are doing the same thing. That waterbuck thinks I'm off my head. And the final control, which is of course being blessed today by Kirsty and Jerry, thinks of the same thing. So, my plan this afternoon, and therefore your plan, unless you tell me any different, because it is, after all, your game drive as much as it is mine, is to go to Treehouse Dam initially. Then I think we might pop on to Arathusa, see what's going on there. Very little was going on there this afternoon, but they do have some water there. And I think popping from water point to start with today is a good idea. The wild dogs were on Simbambili earlier, so when we wind our way out of Arathusa, we'll probably head towards Sydney's Dam, and we'll use the super zoom camera here to get a picture perhaps of that huge crocodile that I'm convinced I saw there yesterday. Many people think that that was a hippo. I am unconvinced, but it might have been a hippo. And with any luck, those wild dogs will hunt somewhere between One-Eye Pan in Simbambili and Sydney's Dam in Buffelshoek. And that particular area, it will be rich in impala and warthog and other things that wild dogs like to eat. And with any luck, we'll be able to see them. So that's the general plan. Let's leave this waterbuck to himself and his very clever spot here in the shade, and we'll press on towards Simbambili. I'm going to go via Treehouse Dam. There is still one puddle of water there, fed by an underground flow of water in the drainage line that feeds the dam. And there might be something having a drink there, perhaps a warthog boar, perhaps a lonely elephant. So Diana, thank you very much. You've got 3 words for me to describe what we were feeling there? You said peaceful and silent. Silent and peaceful. Look, Andrew, there's a kudu having a wee. Now, this is the closest I've ever got to a kudu here, and I think it's simply because we've caught her mid-flow, as it were. Thank you, Stephen. You say tranquility and paradise. Obviously not for the kudu here, for the feeling that we got when we were sitting looking at the waterbuck. I think that's a very good way of putting it. Tranquility and paradise. Now, kudu obviously is a browser. You can see eats leaves off trees rather than grass. Found herself a little sapling that has managed to obviously tap into some underground water and has put up a number of beautiful green shoots. I don't think that's going to last long at a verdant green color like that. I think it's going to be devoured. Oh, don't know what freaked her out. You can see the tail there. You see how the tail flicks up towards the back? And there's a white patch underneath, like a long white pom-pom. And if she's alarmed, she'll stick it all the way up. And she's obviously slightly alarmed, so it's halfway up. And they know exactly from where they're being observed. And so often, just like with the ground hornbill we had this morning, she's walked behind a tree to put herself between us and the tree, at least to put the tree between her and us, simply so that she can feel like she's got a bit of cover. Even though her head is turned away from us, of course, their eyes are in the sides of their heads, and that means that they can see pretty much, well, if it's not 360 degrees, it's straight in front to all the way around there. It's probably about 270 degrees, so far further around their heads than we can, or any of the predators can. And as we know, that comes with sacrifices. And the sacrifice to having eyes like that, which are brilliant security detectors, the sacrifice to that, of course, that they don't have binocular vision. So they cannot judge distance effectively with their eyes. The way you judge distance from one point to another is because your eyes focus onto it together, and that gives you an impression. It allows you to be able to judge a distance. Birds do it quite often, have binocular vision, quite impressive binocular vision, as do most of the predators. But apparently a lot of these herbivores don't have very sophisticated binocular vision at all. So it is hot, but it's not as hot as I thought it was going to be. It doesn't feel quite as boiling as it was. In Connecticut, where I believe it is probably freezing cold at the moment, your three words are peace, earth, and toasty. Is that what you heard? Peace, earth, and toasty. Thank you, Enid. It certainly is toasty. It's probably more roasty than toasty, but certainly. Thank you, Enid. Just some wispy clouds about the place. There were a few thunderheads coming up over the mountains, but I don't think they're going to give us anything today. And thank you very much, Sarah. Wonderful Wild Kingdom was your answer to the three words when we were looking at the waterbuck at the beginning. Thank you very much for that, Sarah, and thank you to all of you who've sent through answers. We can't read them all out because there's so many. So thank you very much for that. And I hope whatever those words were for you, you are able to absorb them and take them in as we go through the drive. And perhaps we'll do something similar at the end when it cools down a bit, and perhaps you'll have a slightly different impression of things. Right, we're heading towards the waterhole here, and there are a few impala about the place. And these impala We'll be not too far from the water. I think they'll probably find that they are utilizing this little puddle at Treehouse Dam quite extensively. That one you can see curved horns, born probably November 2014, so just over a year old. Easy to age until they get to about 3 years old, and then it becomes almost impossible because their horns don't change shape. Very nice, thank you, Andrew. And just as we go under this marula tree, just look at the leaves and the way they're wilting. We talk a lot about the herbivores struggling in the drought. We talk a lot about the advantages that it brings to the carnivores. And Lisa on Twitter, you want to know what about the invertebrates, the spiders, and especially the golden orbweb spiders. Well, I can comfortably tell you what's going on with them. They're not having a good time of it. I've seen one golden orbweb spider this year, and that was on the walk the other day. There was a little female like that. I mean, of course, they get up to about that size. But this was a little female, and they're not around. Look, I said there might be a warthog there. There he is. Unfortunately, he's running off, poor fellow. Obviously disturbed him. Sorry, chap. He didn't like our discussion. Didn't want to be caught by the water. I love that tail. It's just so wonderful. Right. So the golden orbweb spiders, of course, are totally dependent on water. I'm not sure why, but probably because the number of insects that they need to eat are dependent on water as well. So only one golden orbweb spider, where normally you'll find them strewn through every sort of available tree. There will be a golden orbweb spider weaving or spinning a beautiful golden orb web. Not this year. Just drive onto the dam wall. And you can see perhaps a little bit of the moisture where that warthog was reclining. And there it is. Just inside there. So underground water flowing along what is this sort of dry drainage line and dug there. That hole was dug by elephants. It's probably not producing enough water at the moment for the elephants to bother drinking from it. And so it's a well-used piece of real estate for things like impala and warthog and other small animals. I'm sure duiker come down and steenbok come down to have a drink every so often, possibly when there's in the very heat of the day, when the chances of being spotted by a predator are very small. Now, as far as I understand it, Jamie is off in the southeast of the reserve, looking perhaps for tracks of Tingana coming across onto Djuma. That would be marvelous. Let's go and find out from her what she's managed to find.
Looking for tracks of Tingana and also checking all of the deep shady patches around. One thing I have noticed, just from that drive from the Pan down to our southern boundary, is just how quiet the birds are. Even they are seeking refuge in the shadowy parts of the thicker bushes to try and stay cool. And as a result, there's not really, apart from the odd rattling testicular call, there's not really even one peep from them. Quite often in a midwinter's afternoon, they'll chirp all the way through the day. You'll hear them. Yes, there's definitely an increase in the dawn chorus, so the songs that they sing in the morning, and the songs that they sing in the afternoon or late evening. But you'll hear them pretty much throughout the day, whereas at this time of year, oh dear, Brian, we're going to be consuming dust. I'm just going to hover here for us. I'm not quite sure what to do. If we stay still in the sun, we boil. If we don't, we eat dust. Oh no, there's another one. Oh no. This appears to be the main source of all traffic. I've timed my arrival very badly. I'm just going to let them go ahead. They seem to be on quite a mission. Makes sense to just let them go further. How's it?
Smile or what? Can you see my tummy's been held in?
How's it? Cheers.
The line.
No, we haven't seen them.
Anything interesting here?
Not on our side, but apparently Tingana was around the Gowrie Main Chitacut line. Cool. Enjoy. Okie dokie. Onwards. Right, I was chatting a little bit about birds and their bird choruses and all of the noise that they make. Sorry, Brian. I'm going to be sneezing all the way through the drive. I know what we'll do. Let's take a trip up the Mawati first. Enjoy a little bit of the shade, find what we can there, and then we'll go back and check for Tingana's tracks. Once the dust has all settled, we can approach it from a slightly different direction. No real harm done. I had no particular reason for taking this route. So birds and their dawn chorus and their calls. I learned something really interesting this afternoon whilst I was cooling off in the swimming pool and reading a textbook about birds. So there's a couple of bird species that are really, really good mimics of the other birds. Things like drongos, robin chats, all of those bird species. And they've often fooled, they're potentially good enough to fool even the best birder, even the most astute with an ear for the different calls, may get them mixed up. But it's an interesting one because we've talked before about brood parasitism. So birds like the cuckoos or the honeyguides laying their eggs in a host species nest and then allowing them to put all of the effort into raising their chicks. Apparently, one of the defense mechanisms against that is those imitating bird calls. They can actually imitate the sounds of a cuckoo. So basically around their nest, they imitate the sound of, say, a Deirdre's cuckoo or a Jacobin or whatever particular bird happens to parasitize their nests, and thereby actually intimidate them and stop them from moving into the area and reduce the risk that they're going to nest inside them. And interestingly, if we look at these holes in the side of the wall here, and I know we've spoken before multiple times about them, these nesting sites, they haven't been occupied this year as far as I know, and usually utilized either by bee-eaters or kingfishers. Just since we're here and we're chatting about them, we're not going to stay still for too long because otherwise Brian and myself might cook. But you get the rough idea. Excavated holes in the walls, tunnels that then dip down slightly into the sandy wall itself, constructed by bee-eaters and kingfishers, and a safe, secure place to lay their eggs, you would think. But there are certain species of cuckoos, since we are talking about the different ways in which they are either successful or unsuccessful, that imitate those or go into those nest holes and lay their eggs there. Now, most species of cuckoo have to imitate the type of egg or the look of the host species' egg. For example, the Deirdre's cuckoo is famous for it. It can imitate up to 4 different eggs, from the little blue robin eggs to the speckled weaver's nest or weaver's eggs, anything along those lines. But for the cuckoos that parasitize those birds that nest in tunnels, you actually don't need to. Birdie is big. I just did what birds do and flew away. There's an emerald-spotted wood dove. Oh, this is a good place to be. I think we should just park off here, Brian. What do you think? Thick, deep shade. There's another thick, deep, shady spot. Now, this is definitely not a time to come to Africa if you're feeling particularly warm. I'll stop at the spur file just so that we've got something to... Actually, it's quite fun watching the way it's navigating the pathway. They're fascinating little birds. Here's that other one gone. was hoping it was going to reappear. Natal Franklins, or Natal Spurfowls as they're now known, my apologies. And their little constant cheeping contact calls. They've got the right idea. Occupying the Mawati drainage line. And in fact, in this open patch, we've also got the wind as well as the shade. Perfect spot to be. I think, in fact, those cars did us a favor. Hey, Brian? This is the place to be on a hot afternoon. What was I chatting about? Oh, yes. I was chatting about the weather because Donna wanted to know what the weather's like in August. And actually, Donna, it's one of my favorite times of year, right up to sort of September, October, the end of the winter period. The nights are still a little bit chilly in the early morning, so if you're planning on a trip in August, Donna, it is a wonderful time to come. Your game viewing is incredible. It's still cool enough that you've got a chance of seeing the mysterious nocturnal creatures coming out a little bit earlier, or maybe going back to bed a little bit later. And at the same time, it's warm enough that you could actually, in the middle of the day, put your swimming costume on and go for a quick dip in the lodge pool. So August weather is lovely. It's a lovely time to be in the bush. One of my favorites. I think September actually comes up close as well. There's nothing like the shade of these giants. I know that Brent did a very interesting demonstration this morning where he sat on the tracker seat of the car and let it drive itself. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sit and look up at the beautiful trees that are keeping us in their shade. These gentle giants, the jackalberry tree that you're looking at the moment. One of my favorite things to do, drive through these drainage lines. While I am complaining, not complaining, just updating you as to what the temperature currently feels like. A lot of you have been sending through your updates about how warm or how cold, for the most part, it is. Thank you, guys. It gives us a really interesting perspective on the way in which our different viewers are experiencing the weather outside their front doors. For us, we sometimes forget, and often I've complained of being chilly and then remembered quite clearly that some of our viewers definitely have not experienced or do not think that the temperatures I think are cold are actually cold. So it always gives you a very interesting glance into other people's lives. At this point, I'm so adapted to sitting in hot temperatures that anything, as soon as the mercury dips below about 20, which I think is about 74, 25, which is about 74 degrees or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. As soon as that temperature dips below that, I'm freezing and I need a jacket. And I know that some of you have hit minus temperatures, freezing, I'm not sure. Conversion in Fahrenheit is not my greatest. I've heard tell of 18 degrees Fahrenheit in certain states. And thick piles of snow. Oopsie. Probably have concentrated a bit better. Sorry, Brian. Have a russet bush willow. Now that is actually something I meant to update you on, and I completely forgot. And my sincere apologies. Is the question that came from Tammy about where are the Birmingham boys? Has the drought kept them near better water holes? What's going on? Why haven't we seen them in a little while? Tammy, I meant to update you. My apologies. There are a couple of Birmingham boys we think on a kill just to the south of Weaver's Nest, just to the south of where we are. And there's a couple more towards the Nkoro side. Apparently, Brent was at a Rangers meeting this afternoon, and apparently there was a run-in between the Nkuhumas and the Sticks at some point last night, and the Sticks fled further to the west whilst the Nkuhumas stayed around Nkoro. That is the word on the street, so to speak, or the word on the dirt road would probably be more appropriate. Might have needed to turn the steering wheel there. And Tammy, in terms of why we haven't seen them, and if it's because they're at better water, the answer is no, not really. This is fairly typical lion behavior. We're seeing it with the Talamatis as well in Buffelshoek and the Salati males in Buffelshoek. they don't have to go all that far away to catch the animals that are coming to the dam. So they're sticking around in what they consider to be the core part of their home ranges. The Nkuhumas have moved around a little bit recently, for which we are very grateful because it allowed us to see them for a couple of days and have some wonderful views. But it's not that unexpected for lions during a drought period to stick very closely to a fairly familiar area. Now, we do know every now and again we pick up on the Birmingham's tracks, so they do still come into Djuma. Oh, that's very bright. So they come into Djuma and then they cross back out again. Why it is that they've decided maybe they just don't feel like Djuma needs to be defended as closely as our southern boundary. I love this archway. It's so beautiful. It's almost like it's an entrance to the Mawati. Definitely one of my favorite things. It's a russet bush willow that is curved over and made a sort of a, what would you call it? I guess a gabled arch would be the accurate representation. We don't need to switch off though. Natural archway for us to go under. Interesting. Very cool. It also means that Brian has to drop down our antenna. We don't actually fit under that unless we do. So Tammy, in terms of the Birmingham boys, one other option is that within their southern boundary, their biggest threats are, for example, the Salati males, who are large and very healthy. Well, one of them's got an injured foot. There are two big males up in that direction. There's also, to the north, sorry. Whereas to the south, along that Mala border and further along, there's always a bigger threat. And I've noticed there's a lot more vocalization that comes from the male lions in the south. So, for example, the Charleston males around that sort of area. It seems as though they're a bit more vocal, a bit more defensive of their territories. Obviously, that plays a factor as well in terms of where the Birmingham boys go. So they like to, they pick where they feel their weakest boundary is, and then they patrol along that. And that way work to keep their territory safe. Obviously, they don't feel the same amount of threat from the Salati males in their northern boundary. And I must say, I hardly ever hear the Salati males vocalizing at night. And that vocalization is an all-important part of the interaction between the different males and the way in which they maintain their territorial boundaries without necessarily having to come to a physical confrontation at any point. So I think it's a combination of factors, that plus the Nkuhuma female being an estrus, and it was the Styx female before that, also has a tendency to keep a lion within a slightly more restricted home or restricted area. Females and the males don't move around as much or nearly as much, and the other males, even if they aren't mating with her, will stick close to in case they get the opportunity to do so. Whilst Brian and myself continue along our Mawati drainage line tour, let's pop over to James, find out what he's been up
to. Look at that beautiful picture of a yellow-billed hornbill.
Hey, good afternoon,
Sorry, everybody. That was the Game Drive radio. Thankfully, the hornbill didn't take offense, and you can hear him calling. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that the most beautiful sound? And the beak is open like that, not just for the call. The beak is open, of course, because birds pant, just like many mammals do. And it's called a gular flutter, and you can see the throat. You can see his throat there puffing away. You can see his tongue. Oh, that's wonderful. Can you see the throat pumping up and down? Now, inside the throat is just like our throats. It's quite moist, but in the throat of a bird like that, there's a lot of vein and arterial blood flowing through there so that it can cool down as the bird pants, and that can then go to the brain and cool down the most important part of the body. Look at the eyes. Isn't that amazing? And I don't know if any of you were watching this morning, but we had that incredible sighting of a ground hornbill a relative, and not very close relative, but relatively close relative of the yellow-billed hornbill. And you can see that this one too has those red wattles underneath the beak. Oh, what a wonderful sighting. That's brilliant. Fantastic. There are also some waterbuck here. I'm just going to sneak a little bit forward. This one is a waterbuck cow. She is hiding behind a small leaf, thinking that she's either invisible or too hot to give a damn. It's quite possibly the latter. It does feel unspeakably hot, and I must say, of course, in the next 2 days, it's going to get even hotter. We have a prediction of 40 degrees Celsius, which is about 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's for Monday. Anyway, we'll see what happens. But so still today, so completely still. And now that that bird has stopped going, so there is no sound at all. Now, Andrew, would you just go off to that? Can you see the spider web? Yes. See that? Hello, Colleen. You're watching with your husband, Jason, and that spider's web has got absolutely nothing to do with what you're asking, but it does have to do with a query we had about golden orb web spiders. That is not a golden orb web spider. It looks a little bit like it is the beginnings of a community web spider, but even they will be struggling in the absence of lots of insects for them to eat. So a very scraggly example of a spider's web, and a particularly impressive spider when it has built a home that sort of is. And sorry, I'm just waiting for a name that's coming through. Kirsten, key your microphone a little bit longer because we're on Arethusa, if you don't mind. There we go. It was Lisa who was asking about the golden orb web spiders. And so, Lisa, that is a spider web for you. Now, Colleen, you are watching with your husband for the first time, and he wants to know, has there ever been a time where we've gone out and it's been so hot that we've been worried we might create a spark driving along that might in turn create a fire in the bush? Now, these waterbuck are going to have to move away slightly. Well, they're not going to have to, but they're going to choose to. And I want to show you something. It's a very good question. Now, the thing about when it's hot here is that normally it's also wet. And so the chances of there being a fire are very small in the summertime because it's normally very wet and normally the grass is quite high. But if you look across here now, no amount of flame or spark is going to set a fire through here. There's simply nothing to burn. And out here, the flames would take maybe some of that dry grass there, but there's just nothing for it to burn. No flame. Sorry, are you losing me, Andrew? Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry, everybody. How's that? Better? Yeah. Okay. So no flame is ever going to be able to rush through here. No flame will be able to take any of the trees without the trees having a lot of grass underneath them. So what happens is, in a very wet season, the grass sward grows up. In an area like this, you'd find that the grass would be round about this high after a proper growth season. And then we'd go into the subsequent dry season, so September, October time. And then, if there was to be a spark or something large like a lightning strike in the September or October, then it would burn. And so the chances of it burning in summer when it's hot are very, very small indeed. And I mean, I would be more than happy to take a box of matches and throw that into the bush. It might burn a little patch and then it would go again. September, October, when there's a bit of wind, the grass is still high and we get lightning strikes. That's the kind of major fire season. But now, heat like this with no grass, no, I wouldn't be worried in the slightest about driving along and causing any kind of fire. Nice question. Thank you for that very much. Sorry, Andrew, I will remember next time to place the aerial in an acceptable position. Yes. Right, we're heading towards Arathusa Dam. It's not too far from here. See what is there. The last 2 days there have been 2 magnificent elephant bulls and a young elephant bull. Ooh. Now Tony in London, you want to know when I last saw a caracal. Tony, I've never seen a caracal here. I think the last time I saw a caracal was probably, I'm just trying to think, probably at Ngala, which is no, it would have been at Londolozi down south of here. But almost 10 years ago. They're not common here. They're very common in South Africa, in the middle parts of the country, around the Karoo, possibly into the Eastern Cape. They're much more common, and they're certainly, I mean, in some areas where they're sheep farm and goat farmers, they become real stock thieves. So they're a bit of an issue there. But in these areas, they're extremely secretive because, of course, they're way down on the predator hierarchy, and they will be wanting to avoid as many predators as possible. And the last time I actually saw a picture of a caracal, it had been caught by a leopard. A leopard will see a caracal as fair game and very happily take it out and eat it. And then today, while on the subject of sort of rare cats, I had to go out in the middle of the day to go and GPS a few things. Ooh, there's a big elephant. To go and GPS a few things for a new repeater tower that we're putting up, and I saw a serval in the middle of the day. It was the most magnificent thing. It exploded out of the shade of a marula tree and ran away. I didn't get a picture of it, but there, oh, there's another elephant there, Andrew. We are now surrounded by 3 elephants. It's wonderful. Let me stop here. I wonder if this isn't one of the same herds that we saw yesterday. Let's try and get a handle on it. Not... Oh, there's a very little one up ahead. And I'm going to leave these ones. Let's just sneak forward a bit. I'm just going to stop there to start with so that you can see the little one before we get too close to him. He's already obviously eating bush, not just milk, probably still suckling, but will slowly be weaning on the solids, as it were. In fact, this is quite a decent sized herd of elephants, so 3 or 4 behind us, and probably another 5 or 6 in front in various parts of the bush around here. Isn't he sweet? He's just smelling us. Totally relaxed at the moment. The wind is blowing slightly towards him, so he'll be picking up our scent, but obviously not very worried about it, and probably not worried about us because his mother, who is grazing just to the, or browsing just to the right-hand side there, is not reacting to us. Were she to react, were she to give a signal, a low infrasonic rumble, he would definitely respond, go to her, and they might move off. But because she seems to be totally relaxed, so the little one is too. And as I've said before, the elephants at this time of the year would normally be grazing. They'd normally be pulling grass instead of trying to eat leaves off trees like that little elephant is trying to do now. Instead of wrapping that trunk around leaves, he'd be wrapping them around grass and then eating that, but that's just not possible at the moment. And you can see how that trunk, even at that age, I think that elephant is probably about 18 months old, maybe a little bit younger than that. And you can see still the trunk is not particularly competent at picking up things to eat. So he's kind of pushing or pulling the leaves off the tree, dropping them on the ground, and then picking them up from there. With that prehensile tip. And prehensile means like a hand, basically, like fingers. Seems a bit confused by the sheer number of leaves on that Cambritum bush. Oh. What a fantastic shot. There's Mum. Not sure if she's putting herself between the baby and us. Maybe it is an element of that. Maybe just that lovely green tree that she wants to devour. You'll find every so often also what they do is, you saw her there put her trunk in her mouth. And that's a function of the fact that she will be interpreting. I'm just going to turn the virtual reality rig on now. She will be interpreting signals, olfactory signals in the air, and touching them into her mouth so that she can push them into what we call the vemeronasal organ, which is the organ of Jacobson. And that's the organ that all of animals out here have that helps them to interpret the different smells that they have. We have a kind of vestigial version thereof, but we don't use our olfactory senses nearly as much as an elephant. So when she puts her trunk into her mouth and there's nothing in it, you can almost be sure that she's had a smell at something and she wants to try and interpret it. So I'm just going to point out for the VR rig here what we're looking at. Look at that, isn't that wonderful? So to the left, a beautiful elephant cow walking past. Just in front of her there, her calf is coming. And to the left, to the right, a whole lot of other elephants just grazing through the woodland here. Here comes the little calf. Focusing on the same species, that's quite interesting. So the calf has stopped at the same two species of tree. It's a red bush willow tree, obviously something that is quite tasty to the calf. To us, very much full of tannins, not very nice to eat. And I suspect maybe why he's not making a huge effort to pick up too many of those leaves. Probably still having a bit of a suckle now and then. And so not... That's wonderful. And look at it, isn't that brilliant? He's almost playing. He just doesn't seem to be making a particularly strong effort to eat that tree. And there's a greenthorn or torchwood next to us about to take a bit of a hammering. It's certainly not going to be the first hammering that tree's taken. And the mother there is very selectively taking the new shoots. Look at that. She's not pulling the whole branch off. She's taking the very, very newest shoots off the top of the tree. Look at that. That's amazing. Now you'll find that the chemical composition in the younger leaves will probably be very different from those in the older leaves. Probably less in the way of tannin or some other chemical that she is sensing. I've never seen that before. See that? She could easily just break off that whole thing and stuff it in her mouth, but she's taking very specific parts of the tree. That's fascinating. That really is interesting. You can see she's a bit wet. She's obviously been in the Arathusa Dam. We're not far from there at all. Here comes the little one. That was just me syncing the VR rig. Don't think we'll use that shot. Susan, you are in New York, where it is very cold, very chilly. Just going to reverse a little. And you want to know why there are no big tuskers in the Sabi sands. Susan, there are very few big tuskers left anywhere in South Africa. And that is simply a function of the fact that they've been shot out, basically. Their genes have been shot out of the area. There are one or two, well, there have been a few in the last few years. There were 7 bulls in the Kruger, known as the Magnificent Seven, for a long time. The last of them is now dead. And their genes will still be in the population, but they will be few and far between that you will see bulls enormous. Oh, look at that. There goes the tree.
There's a couple in Love, quite a few Madura and Love around, yeah, Mr. Fire Marty, a lot of and Love, slumbies all over the show sometimes.
So Susan, big tuskers We see one or two. We don't see those enormous bulls with their, that kind of leave plow marks as they walk along the place, because their genes, I'm afraid, have just been shot out of the population. But that was a long time ago. Now back onto the sort of story of tusks. Monique, you're in London, and you want to know about the tusks on the female there and whether they are stubby or not. Is there something wrong with them? There's absolutely nothing wrong with them, Monique. Those are normal. You'll find that elephants have tusks that grow in all sorts of different directions, some sideways, some frontwards, some downwards, some all over the place. And that's just Roy going past in his Land Cruiser with his guests. And so it's not unusual to find a cow with tusks like that. The difference between male and female tusks is the kind of thickness. And normally a female's tusks will grow down towards the ground, but you can see very clearly that hers are growing outwards, a bit like a bull's tusks, and that's not unusual. She's got pretty normal tusks out here. We do see that one female who I think the Twitterverse has dubbed Fang, which is not a very nice name. She's got a very long recurved tusk. It comes back and looks like it might stab her in the knee every time she walks. And that would be far more unusual than the tusks that this elephant has. She's not young, well, she's not old. I would put her at about 25 to 30 years old. And so the size of her tusks and shape has got nothing to do with her age as such. Chris Applegate, you say you love watching the babies because they're so clumsy and curious. Yes, they are. Isn't it wonderful? I'm just going to whisper quietly here. This is unusual behavior for a cow. She's now less than 3 feet from us. This is the most spectacular experience. And interestingly, just as Chris was saying that, it's the cow that's come and had a look at us. But completely unlike with a bull, she hasn't come to kind of look. She's just ignoring us and going past so that she can eat. It's wonderful. She was less than 3 feet from us. Andrew, how are you feeling?
Feeling good.
Isn't that awesome? And elephants have a way of communicating with us, a way I feel that is, it's definitely sixth sensory. It might be, you can call it telepathy, you can call it whatever you like. I didn't feel any sense of threat from this elephant as she walked past us. Did you, Andrew?
No. Not like the big bull does it?
Exactly. The big bull was he was definitely approaching us to look. But this cow had absolutely no interest to us. We just happened to be kind of in the way of where she wanted to go. And I'll watch carefully for the baby and see when he comes and see how closely he's prepared to come towards us. If she does feel uncomfortable with us, she will warn us. Well, normally. Unless she's really cross. But clearly she isn't. Oh, what a lovely question. As this little youngster comes towards us, I'm going to be very quiet. And then, James Richard, I will answer your question about how sensitive I think animals are to our emotions. Oh, this is too much. Hello, little fellow. James, you want to know if your question is just anthropomorphic. Are you anthropomorphizing animals by by saying that, or asking if they are sensitive to our emotions or not. I don't believe so at all. I think animals are tremendously sensitive to our emotions. You have only to have owned a cat or a dog to know that. And I know that for a long time in science it was very unfashionable to ascribe human emotions to animals and to kind of intimate that there could be some kind of extra sensory communication. And by extra, I mean through some kind of channel that we don't necessarily understand. I don't believe that to be the case, and I used to believe it was the case. I'm utterly convinced that these animals pick up on our emotions, they pick up on our state of mind, they pick up on our, basically our energy. And I know that if I'm in an angry mood, elephants won't approach like that. They won't. They'll move away, they'll move around, they'll lift their heads and look like this. And if you're feeling peaceful, 9 times out of 10, they will just ignore you and get on with it. I think it's just astonishing to see and to watch. And I think going forward, research will eventually be able to show exactly what that communication is and how to describe it. Because I'm obviously making a bit of a hash of describing it. But I'm convinced that there is some kind of communication there. I'm not going to follow them through there. We've had a beautiful sighting of them. I don't want to make a noise. So let's go down to the water and see if there's anything there. Wasn't that just spectacular? Right, while we're on our way there, let's head across to Jamie, see how her progress with Tingana's tracks are, and I'll catch up with you a little later.
One of my favorite creatures to spend time with is elephants, but we've also got some really stunning antelope here before they disappear into the depths of the shade of the guarri bushes. And this thick, dense vegetation, leaves that she's just wandered behind. I know that you were having a conversation with James about fires and bushfires, and I know he gave a demonstration. However, if there is a situation where there is a fire, this is the sort of bush that is your friend out here in the veld, because first of all it keeps its leaves throughout the year, so it's evergreen. Secondly, it's got quite nice dense foliage with thin leaves that never become too dry or crispy. And the reason that is useful in a fire season is because it works really well as a fire beater. That is one of the best uses of the magic guarri. It's also thought to be one of the same reasons that lions often spray or scent mark, lions and leopards scent mark on that particular tree in order to, because that vegetation seems to hold the scent ever so slightly. There's another theory, and that is that it is because they spray on those bushes because other animals don't tend to feed on them that much. Although I have to confess, I don't think that any self-respecting herbivore, unless it's absolutely desperate, is going to feed where a lion or a leopard has just scent marked. Their sense of smell is strong enough that they're not going to go nibbling there. And it seems as though we've been driving the entire eastern corner of Djuma, and all of these antelope species are desperately seeking out the thicker bushes for the shade that they can utilize. Baba Anyala. I'm just going to grab a piece of guarri bush. This is not the best example. I'm trying to find you a nice patch of guarri. This will do. Since we're here, I'm going to do this on while we drive, but I just wanted to show you exactly what those leaves look like up close. And you can imagine how if you pile all of these thick, this is possibly not the best example because it's been munched on by various caterpillar species. But we've chatted before about the uses of the magic guarri. So now when you come out on your budding rangers courses or whenever you come out on safari, you can fix in your mind what a guarri bush looks like. And of course there's always the demonstration. I'm not going to do it now because I'm sitting in the sun and I would like to move. but you can utilize them as toothbrushes. We've spoken a bit about that. I think it was yesterday morning, or was it? Yes, at some point we chatted a bit about leadwood bark or leadwood ash being used as a toothpaste, and I said that you can combine that with the guarri bush. And the reason why is that you can actually chew it, and it splinters quite nicely to create a sort of a bristly type brush. It's also quite bitter though, as you do. But chatting a bit about plants, and that is an indigenous plant, Ramona was wondering about the different invasive plants that we get out here, where they might be most commonly occurring and what kind of effects that they have. And there's quite a few species. One of the most invasive are the combination of lantanas or water hyacinths. And those are the ones that very often clog up the waterways. All of those water weeds that you see around Arathusa Dam, a lot of those are invasive plants. As well as, I know you were looking at the green stuff, we've looked at it a couple of times, the sort of green layer covering Buffelshoek Dam after it dried up, that the elephants were absolutely loving. So there are quite a few invasive plant species. However, James has just arrived at Arathusa Dam, and since he's got a nice clear demonstration, I think it's better to pass that question across to him.
But a semi-cold beer after a hot... What'd she say? I'm not copying her. Why are we not copying her? Just give her a thumb. Just give her a 2.
Sorry, Kirst. I think it just made sense for him to continue on with that answer. Sorry, guys. It looks as though my earpiece has stopped working, so I'm not hearing from Final Control as clearly as I should be. I was in the middle of chatting a bit about Ramona's answer, the question that Ramona asked about the different invasive plants, and we spoke a little bit about water hyacinth and lantana, and the fact that they are quite clearly invasive to the point not just that they outcompete the other naturally occurring water plants, but they also clog up waterways where there should actually be water flow and prevent it from moving, and that in turn incubates things like mosquito larvae and anything like that. And there's also a couple of other plants. Most of the flower species that you see, the star zinnias, a lot of the string of stars species, the brightly colored flowers, a lot of those are actually alien plants, but they're not really hugely invasive. So they don't cause major problems in certain areas. I know that apparently quarantine last year, when there was a lot of rain, quarantine clearings was absolutely blanketed in, I'm not sure if it was star zinnia or one of the red flower species. And that in itself is an interesting effect that those plants can have. So those are the sort of the main plant species. There's a lot of conservation efforts going into removing those various invasive species and replacing them with indigenous plants. It's amazing the way that different plants have an effect. And there's one major argument that continues throughout the big cities, not so much prevalent here, but the fact that... Hello, Taxon, I wonder what you're up to. Ah, it's Aubrey. How's it, Aubs? Afternoon, how are you?
I'm very well.
I hear you had Karula this side.
Yeah, I'm going to cross now.
Okay, she's still there?
Yes, yeah, text.
We'll return to that conversation a little bit later. Cheers, guys. There was a gasp of shock from the back of Aubrey's vehicle, who has guessed that Novi. So that was the reason behind that particular reaction. And just to let you know, while we're doing that update about Karula, you heard me speaking to Aubrey, and I know James updated the viewers. Karula was last seen on Torchwood on a baby waterbuck kill. So both Tingana and Karula have killed baby waterbuck in the last few days. Karula on Torchwood, Tingana just to the south of her. It seems as though James is back up and running, so let's find out what's happening at Arathusa Dam.
Sorry about the last time, everybody. We lost communications with Final Control. Not their fault, of course. It was just simply a glitch in the proverbial matrix. Well, we're here at Arathusa Dam. There's a great deal of activity going on, which is magnificent. We've got a sounder of warthogs there, grazing upon the calyces on their knees, an elephant bull moving off to the left-hand side of your screen, and then to the right-hand side of your screen, if I get out of your way, we've got some impala. Down at the dam, there's two elephants, one on the wall, one in the water, and two beautiful kudu bulls coming down to have a drink. And the elephant is just showing his displeasure at those kudu bulls. I'm not sure why he doesn't like them, but they tend to become extremely territorial. I mean, they're not territorial, but they seem to become extremely protective about the water for some reason, and we don't really know why that is, possibly because of the drought, and they're worried that their water resources will be diminished. Quite what those kudu will do to diminish this dam, I'm not really sure. But he did open his ears out at them. So I think what we'll do is just ease. I was hoping this elephant might approach us after the warthogs, but he's moving through the bush there. So I think what we'll do is move down towards the water and see about the animals that are drinking there. If we do lose communication with the Final Control again, it will preclude us answering your questions, so I'm sorry about that in advance, but we had a sighting exactly here the other day and it was fine. So let's see what happens now. Let's stop here to start with. So I'm just going to stop here to start with, simply because I don't want to frighten the kudu away. They're very skittish, and of course because of the dry conditions we don't want to have them chased away from the only opportunity for them to drink during the day. Anyway, there are the elephants. They're not put off by us at all. One of them indeed, there are the kudus. Sorry. The elephant there, Andrew, is scratching his buttocks. Can you see that? And here comes a wildebeest as well. All happening here. I suspect the wildebeest is not alone. Kudu coming up behind the wildebeest. Ramona, while we're watching this great hive of activity and not really knowing where to point the camera because it's all happening here, you want to know about invasive vegetation and what kind of invasive vegetation do we get here? Well, you're looking at some at the moment. The water hyacinth in here is an invasive plant, or certainly an exotic plant. Now remember, we need to differentiate between an invasive plant and an exotic plant. So an invasive plant is an exotic that takes over natural areas, like this water hyacinth has. It becomes completely out of control in some water areas, and I mean, you can see that it's covered the surface of this water, rendering it fairly ineffective, and it'll be drinking a lot of the water. I'm sure it'll be making it probably quite anaerobic, taking the oxygen out of the water, so I would consider that an invasive. There's a hippopotamus in there as well, with a terrapin on his back. And so, Ramona, that would be an invasive plant. Then we've got quite a few exotics that occur here from time to time. Something like that beautiful red star zinnia, which is a Peruvian plant, which comes up in the early summer, is a beautiful red kind of daisy-looking plant. Now, that would be an exotic, but it's not invasive. It doesn't take over areas of natural vegetation. It kind of grows and then disappears again. It doesn't have any deleterious effects that we know of. Then, of course, you get things like lantana sometimes. There are some indigenous species of lantana, but there are also some exotic ones that can become invasive, and if we see them, we take them out. And then along the rivers, especially the rivers that flow out of the communities where their catchments are in human settlement areas, often you'll find them lined with things like Mexican poppy, wild tobacco, and various other plants which do become invasive if they're not looked after. But there are groups in South Africa, like the non-governmental organization called Working for Water, that come and clean out alien invasive vegetation, because of course their major effect is to suck out water from natural water systems, and that of course can be a disaster. Look at that kudu slaking his thirst there. You can almost feel the cool water going down his throat and the relief that he must be feeling. Makes me thirsty just watching him. Wonderful. And then, Andrew, if you don't mind, I don't mean to huck you, but on top of the wall there you can see a wildebeest, and he looked like he might try and cross over the wall there, but of course his path is blocked by the other elephant. And I wonder, oh, there are a few more there. No, that's a nyala. There are all sorts of animals here. The kudu in the corner there, you can see them. There's a nyala, I can just see his horns approaching from the other side through there. So lots and lots going on. I think we should sit exactly where we are. I think we're far enough away for those kudu to eventually stop being terrified and come and have a drink. And here comes the big bull now. He looks like he's lumbering out of the water. Isn't he great? Now, we saw a little while back, we saw 3 elephant bulls here, 2 behemoths and 1 youngster. I'm not sure that any of these are the same ones. He's not happy with that wildebeest. He thinks it's very, very cheeky that the wildebeest and those kudu should think about coming to drink some of his water. And I said this the other day when we were sitting here with those elephants. I said, when you're looking at an elephant like this, there really isn't any doubt as to who the real royalty out here is. People will call the lion the king. And I look at an elephant bull like this, and there's just no doubt in my mind that the lion is but a mere underling, a duke or an earl perhaps, but this is the real royalty out here. Hello, Rachel. You're just 7 years old, and it's wonderful to have a question from a 7-year-old champion of the wilderness. You obviously love wildlife, and that's great. You want to know how long an elephant's trunk is. Well, Rachel, it depends on the size of the elephant, really. Just like your arm, of course, is going to grow as you get older, so an elephant's trunk grows as it gets older. So that little elephant that we saw earlier probably has a trunk of about 3 feet long. And this big bull that's going past us now, well, his trunk is probably, I'd say, almost, what shall we say, probably almost 10 feet long when it's stretched out, maybe 9 feet, so very long. And there, there on the wall, the kudu are receiving a bit of a bollocking from that younger bull. See him swaggering down? That's a typical kind of swagger that says, get out of my way. I'm going to brook no question here. And he's obviously also, well, not obviously, but and the others are not really taking him very seriously. They're kind of moving out of his way begrudgingly. Come on, Wildy, brave him. I wonder if he hasn't been avoiding the water because of the bigger bull. Now it's his turn. He's going to monopolize all the resources here. Now he can see the kudu behind him. He'll be able to see them. And he's obviously just a little bit irritated. He's now chasing that blacksmith lapwing in front of him. There he goes. I'll be interested to know if those kudu are actually prepared to come straight down the front of the dam wall there, if they'll go to the other side. Look, straight down. That's amazing. That's really steep, everyone. That is, that's nearly vertical. Ha! There they're going to have a drink. Now, kudu, nyala, bushbuck, steenbok, duiker, not very water dependent. They can survive with very little water. They get a lot of water from their own food. Now, the wildebeest, of course, which has disappeared, seems incongruous here with the kudu. And Paul Rizzo, you want to know if he's the point man for this herd of kudu. No, I think he's probably just hanging out with them in the same way that bull wildebeest like to do with impala. It helps them to keep alive, basically. They're around more eyes and more ears and more noses, and so it helps them to avoid predators, because we don't get big herds of wildebeest here, and so often the lone bulls will spend time with other species in order to keep them safe. And I think that's all he was doing. I think he'll be tolerated by those kudu. There we are, going into the water now. I think we should go and get a little bit closer. Let's have a look. Safari Dean, you want to know if I wish I had elephant's ears to keep me cooler in this heat. Safari Dean, I think I'd look a little silly with elephant ears, to be honest. I think my ears are quite big enough the way they are. But yes, I wouldn't mind having some elephant ears to keep me a little bit cooler. So I'm just going to ease around here. And I think this guy's bored. I think he's chasing kudu, and I think he's now decided that he wants to come and see what we want. I thought he might do this. He came out of the water definitely because we came down to the edge here. Now at the moment there's no aggression from him at all. It's very much just a bull sort of looking about the place. And maybe he's just going to go off and join his friend. He does look kind of frustrated though. And guinea fowl in front of him is definitely a bit wary. Now he's watching us. He's pretending to feed, you can see there. It's almost as if he's trying to con us into believing that he's not looking. And the guinea fowl are now skedaddling out the way. As he does that, look at all the dust there coming up. Hello, Randall. You're in Illinois in America, and you want to know if elephants ever eat meat. No, they don't. You may find them chewing on bones every so often. If there's a severe nutrient shortage, they'll eat either bones or they'll engage in what we call geophagia. They'll eat rocks and sand if they're feeling particularly nutrient deficient, but no, they don't have a digestive system that can cope with meat, and so they won't eat meat. There's a beautiful ring-necked dove who's just lurking about the water here as well, trying to find a few grass seeds, a couple of insects to eat. Look at him in juxtaposition with the size of that elephant. Isn't that wonderful? Excuse me. That's really fantastic to see. And there are some guinea fowl digging away at the elephant dung, and of course they're looking for insects that are buried in the elephant dung, perhaps even the odd seed that's in there. That's fantastic. Isn't that great? Zumi KP, you say that you can hear the peeping of the baby thickney bird that you saw being born, or sort of saw soon after birth, around here under the deck there. I will try and have a look for it, KP, but I can't go right, bless you, Andrew, I can't go right under that deck because it is someone's home. Well, there are two decks actually. There's one there. That's probably the one under which you've seen it, but we can't go that close. So I'm afraid I can't see the little baby dickop, but we'll have a look around. I can see a blacksmith lapwing. I can see some doves, a three-banded plover. Oh, there's even a sandpiper there. I'm just scanning. There's a jacana. And I'm just scanning around to see if I can't see the wee baby dickop or thickney that you've seen. I have checked every time I've come here, I promise. I can't see him here at the moment. So lots of kudu now going past. A couple of nyala, a big herd of nyala coming up onto the, not nyala, what are those things called again, Andrew? Impala, coming up onto the dam wall, and they'll come down and have a drink again, going down that near sheer vertical cliff. And interesting that they've all decided to come here as the elephant has left. That is quite a jump. So I think what we'll do is we'll just watch those impala jump down here and see if they go round, and then we'll press on and see what we can find. Our plan from here will be to go north towards the Marikeni drainage system, which is the main drainage line that runs through Arathusa, and then on towards Sydney's Dam to see what's going on there. And maybe, if we're lucky, those wild dogs will start to get moving. I don't think yet. It's still quite early for them, but maybe by the time we get there around 6 o'clock, they will be moving. There goes the elephant up and over the top of the dam wall, eating bits and pieces. I don't think he's going to go very far from here. Alrighty. As we are leaving, let us go across to Jamie, see what she's doing. I'm not sure where she is or what she's up to, so please go and find out from her and tell me the next time I see you.
Just to continue on our conversation earlier that James took over, and you got a brief glimpse into our background workings, for which we do apologize. The invasive plant species that the elephants have been thoroughly enjoying at Buffelshoek Dam. And of course, not a trace of water at this point, and I don't think even the deep wallows have got any water left in them. But what's interesting to observe is the fact that the elephants are still coming through here, and in fact have been through here probably earlier today. I've noticed a whole load of tracks moving down through into the Buffelshoek Dam, and it's probably to stretch across that mud and go and munch on those plants as well. They might be finding some water underneath the mud. I don't think so. The last time I came here was a couple of weeks ago when I went down into the dam, and Wildebeest and I walked down and examined all of the different mud wallows and holes. There was a tiny, tiny little bit of water. I think that will now be pretty much thoroughly depleted. The reason I actually came up to this direction was I thought that if Tingana was in the Chitwa area, which is one of Mvula's favorite haunts, there was a chance that Mvula might have been pushed up towards Buffelshoek side. And he does enjoy these shady patches in the sand. No sign of him, unfortunately, but interestingly enough, this is where Karula came from. When she walked across sometime last night, and when they tracked her to Torchwood, this is the area that she was in. That's interesting news, and it is a ray of sunshine in my day, or a glimmer of hope certainly, about Karula and her cubs, because if she's coming from these drainage line systems around Gwari Pan, there's more hope that maybe those cubs are in that area. Lots of go-away birds calling, but in a sort of a half-hearted, it's a very lazy quack rather than their normal explosive alarm calls. I don't think there's any leopards hiding here. But you never know. Let's go and investigate the dip, find out if maybe they're around this side. And then failing that, we'll go back to our general standby, which is to race across to Sydney's Dam and find out what's happening there. We've spent a considerable and very productive amount of time at Sydney's Dam over the last few days. go through this dip in case we lose a little bit of signal. Then I will get back to the dryness and the dustiness that B. Wilson has commented on. That's all as well. Awesome. So, while we're driving along, we mentioned earlier when those two vehicles moved past us how Brian and myself were going to be sneezing and itching. What was that? Was that just a dove? Sorry. I'll get back to that train of thought in a moment. I just need to reverse carefully down the hill. I think I saw a little bird of prey shoot up off the ground, or off the road, rather. Just got to make sure I don't reverse off the road in my haste to find it. Let's have a peer about in here. Not sure where it went. I have had the most extraordinary African goshawk sighting in this drainage line. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're still living around here. But wherever it went, I'm afraid it's disappeared somewhere that way. His clutch sounding a little bit painful. Oh yes, earlier I commented on the fact as the dust went whirling that Brian and myself were going to be sneezing, and B. Wilson was wondering, is there a chance of a dust storm here? Because it does look incredibly dry and dusty at this point. And it is incredibly dry and dusty. B. Wilson, you're absolutely correct. It's dry, dusty, hot and baking this afternoon. There isn't, however, that strong a chance of... Sorry. I'm distracted again. I think I might have a track quiz for you. I do have a track quiz for you. Let me find a nice spot to show you these tracks. I think this is probably going to be the best approach. Oh, that puts us in the shade. If I go... You can see which tracks I'm looking at, hey Brian, here. If I put them in the sun like that, perfect. Here we go. Interesting. I'm going to hop out to give you a little bit of perspective because at first glance this is terribly confusing looking. Track quiz for all of you, and I think our regular viewers should get this fairly easily. Not where I would have expected to find it. So, front foot here. 1, 2, 3. And 2 little residual dots there. And the back foot falling here. Next stride, 1, 2, 3 of the front foot with 2 little dots, and then a sort of an indistinctive pattern of the back foot where it falls here. I'm personally surprised and quite excited. There's also a little bit of a sweep. This might give it away. There's a little bit of a sweep along here, moving down in line with the tracks. I think we should get this fairly quickly. Almost feel as though I should say fastest 3 answers to get that track right. Send it through on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. 3 toes in the front foot, 1 indistinct foot, and a sweep or a drag mark. And while we wait for the answers to that quiz, James has got some beautiful birds for you.
So you're back with us, everybody, and that is a European bee-eater sitting on a dead knobthorn tree, and I just think that is the most spectacular picture. Beautiful bird with yellow and blue and gold and a little bit of green. And it will shortly, well not too shortly, in a month or so, decide to head back north to Europe, from where it gets its name and where it breeds. But you can see that gold color on its back shining. Isn't that lovely? And a red eye, beautiful. You can even see its red eye. And it's like a little, bit like the swallows. It's built like a fighter jet to catch insects on the wing and change direction with a quite astonishing speed. But they soar higher often than the swallows do, and so I think they probably catch insects higher up and slightly bigger insects too. Now what I'm going to ask Andrew to do, yeah, exactly. Just look at the tree. Color of the tree and the bird and the sky behind. And if that doesn't fill your soul with a sense that something is right in the world, well then, I'm not sure what will. Isn't that beautiful? It's little scenes like this, everyone, that make me really love living out here. Of course, we want to see the wild dogs in full flight and the leopards draped across the tree limbs and the elephants bathing and swimming. But it's little scenes like this that really touch the heart, I think. Right, on we go. We've left the dam, obviously, at Arathusa, and we're heading towards the Marikeni drainage line. There is some cloud off to the west, but I don't think it's going to do anything to cool us down today. Oh, sorry. Before we continue, Andrew, there's a much larger version of the spider's webs, 2 spiders' webs here. I'm just going to get out here because I'm just interested to see whether the big one that Andrew's looking at now isn't perhaps also being used as a nest by a bird. So Lisa, you were asking about golden orbweb spiders. This, of course, is not a golden orbweb spider, but it is a community nest spider, and there are 2 of them here. Here's the first one. And that's a very small nest there. And I just want to look into the bigger one while you look at the small one, simply because there look to be a bit of a hole in it. And in some of these really big ones, you'll find sunbirds come and nest. But this one, I think, is only, I don't know, it looks like this one's definitely been investigated. It's just full. It's full of little sort of shells, exoskeletons from long devoured invertebrates that have flown or dropped into the nest. So normally, that's a community nest spider, largely made up of a group of fairly vicious female spiders who will regularly eat the males if not enough flies into their nest to eat. But they're totally harmless to people. So for the arachnophobes of you out there, and I'm sure there are a few of you, don't worry, they are totally harmless to human beings. Okay, replug myself in so that Kirsten might talk to me. And there we go. Andrew, did you see how I took the microphone out there? Wasn't that clever of me?
Yes.
Yes. Just give me credit, Andrew, otherwise I feel rejected and despised.
I gave you a thumbs up.
Thank you very much. And we were asked about fire earlier on, of course. Colleen's husband was asking us about fire, and if you look into the bush here, and I pointed this out last time I came through this area, there was a fire through here 2 years ago, and you can see the shape of the vegetation has changed. A lot of the tops of the trees have been killed off, but they're growing from the bottom, and this is a classic symptom of an African tree that's been burned. They are completely used to being burned and completely used to fire, and they survive it with great ease. They just kind of sacrifice the top layer and then grow again from the base. And so what fire often does, quite contrary to thinning vegetation out, it actually makes it thicker. There's a large vulture up there, Andrew. Do you see it?
Yes.
It's that great big ominous looking bird sitting in the dead tree, making it look even more ominous. And that is the white-backed vulture, the most common vulture species that we get here. We've got a kill. What? Oh, I see. A stunning kill there. Well done, Andrew. A bee-eater with some form of insect. I can't even see where you're looking. Oh, there. Brilliant. I'm just trying to identify what it's got there. Looks like a beetle. It is a beetle. Definitely a beetle. Now, what it's doing there It's a very important thing that it's doing there is it's breaking up the exoskeleton. So obviously an insect has got an exoskeleton. They don't have internal bones. They've got a shell outside them that is made of keratin and what's the other substance? It's keratin and lignin, I think. No, lignin's in plants. Anyway, it's made of keratin largely. And very, very difficult to digest. And so the bird obviously doesn't have any teeth on it. So it's got to chew it up and then swallow it. And not chew it up, it's got to smash it up and then swallow it. And that's why it's bashing it against the wood like that, just to kind of break up the exoskeleton and make it more easily digestible. What a wonderful shot. Well done, Andrew. That was the same European bee-eater. I don't know if it's the same individual, but it wasn't a European bee-eater. And there is the vulture looking for dead things from where he sits. And because they're so often seen on carcasses, obviously that's what they like to eat, they are believed in many of the local customs out here to be able to foresee the future. They can foresee death. And that unfortunately has made them quite popular with traditional herbalists and medicine men and women. And so if somebody is desperate and looking for money, they would often poach a vulture and sell it to a traditional healer. And so that is a real threat that they face in the rural areas. So you don't find them much outside of protected areas because of that reason. Right, let's carry on. Here. Right, let's go back to Jamie. I know we disturbed her. She was busy telling you a story when we came across that bee-eater. So we'll carry on into the drainage line here and you go back to Jamie.
To our tracking quiz. It's nice. I was saying to Brian, it's probably one of the best examples of this animal's tracks that I've seen while I've been here. And what's fascinating is that I have reverse tracked, accidentally basically, but reverse tracked this little creature all the way to Buffelshoek boundary opposite Gowrie Cutline, which for those of you familiar with the setup of Djuma and the road network is quite a fair distance. And I almost feel as though I might beg to borrow Brent's camera trap and set it up somewhere around on one of those pathways. See if this animal is walking along them regularly. Something I would love to do and get a view of it. See if we can capture any pictures. However, there's a couple of you who know what I'm talking about and who have got the answer absolutely correct. And before I go on to that though, I want to just talk about those of you who the answers that maybe were not entirely correct, and I want to just explain why they're not correct, because it's no good just telling you the right answer without explaining it properly. So the guess about it being a hippo was not actually correct, and the reason why, and maybe it's difficult to get a perspective of scale, which I can completely understand from the perspective of watching the show. The track that I was looking at was about the size of my hand. So the largest part, those 3 toes that we looked at, 3 prominent toes, are about the size of my hand. That's the back track of the animal. And that little indistinct track in the front is the front track. Now a hippo's track is probably about the size, for a small hippo, of your side dinner plates. It would sort of fit into that. For a larger hippo, for a bull hippo, it would be almost the size of a dinner plate, which you might serve up for a nice large Sunday lunch or celebratory evening. Whatever you might use your plates for. Eating dinner every day would also be another option. Big tracks, and if I find some, and I should be able to find some to explain it, I'll give you a rough difference of perspective, and I'll draw the track that we saw in the middle of a hippo track to have a look. Now Safari Dean, who I believe has attempted 2 answers, one of which was a honey badger. Safari Dean, that's a close option, and I can completely understand why you guessed that, because as you know, honey badgers have those long claws that stick out in the front of the track. Very similar. Honey badger and a porcupine track are incredibly similar, and what's different about them is mainly the presence of those claws. But the claws don't lie flat in the sand, so they don't make those 3 long tracks that we saw before, and in fact only really touch at their tips. So what I mean by that, and I think I'm going to find a nice sandy spot to pull over and just draw for you what I mean. I'll give you a bit of a demonstration. honey badgers, though, you are on the right track in that they have three very prominently close together toes, and then two toes slightly off to the side, either side. But those three, I can understand where the guess about the honey badger came from. I'm looking for a nice patch of sand and a nice patch of light. There's an elephant there, though, so we won't be doing... Actually, we could maybe not. There's elephants all around me. I was going to do a sneaky tracking segment, but unfortunately, of course, I'm always happy to see elephants, but it does mean that I can't get out of the car and draw for you. Here we go. Lovely herd of elephants coming through. I wonder if this is the same female. Looks like it might be. I needed to turn, and we saw the other day right in this spot. It is. It does look like. Does it look like that old female that we saw? I think it is. Slightly skewed tusks. I think it is her. The grandmother elephant. The one that's probably about, I guessed, somewhere in the region of 45 to 55 years old. Lovely old elephant. Can we put that tracking segment on hold, if you don't mind? Because I do want to be able to draw out the different tracks that people have guessed and just provide a bit of more of a clear explanation. Because it's not just a matter of getting the right answer, it's knowing why an answer is correct, which I think is always helpful. Hello, little one. I think this is the little male that came and gave us a bit of a head shake and a talking to the other afternoon as well. Brian, it was with you, hey? Yeah, it is the same herd. Exactly the same spot as well. It's fascinating. And I think this could well be the herd that we saw. We were sitting around the swimming pool this afternoon trying to cool off, and an entire herd came racing past the fence, and you could see their excitement. I know that Brent describes it as an elephant water walk. This was a water run towards the Djuma Dam as they sprinted off. I'm going to just go forward ever so slightly so that we've got a better view as this female approaches. All right, little one. It's okay, little one. No problem. Here comes the grand old matriarch behind this little male can only be with that amount of attitude. Oh, there's nothing like the feeling of peace. And there's a lot of babies in this herd. Not young babies, but a lot of youngsters. Awesome. 1, 2, 3. A couple of the herd members crossing in front of us. Here's that female that came and flapped her ears at us the other day. And as I said, this ancient matriarch, Grandmother Ellie, I wouldn't say ancient, but she's definitely seen her fair share of years come and go, with those collapsed temporal regions